Chapter 2. A Warning of Trouble. Nathan Gombet did not strike Nancy Drew, although for an instant it appeared that he intended to do so. He remained motionless, regarding her with a hatred he made no effort to conceal. His face was distorted, and he stood in a half-crouched position, like an animal about to pounce upon its prey. Nancy knew that she must act quickly, for she saw the man was beside himself with rage. Unless she handed over the papers he demanded, she did not doubt but that he would attempt to do her bodily injury. She must depend upon her own wits to save her, for there was no one within calling distance. If only she could reach the telephone! As the thought came to her, her eyes rested for a moment on the instrument. Nathan Gombet saw the look and understood that she intended to carry out her threat to telephone the authorities. His lips parted in an ugly snarl. "Call the police, will you? Oh no, my little lady, you won't do that." He made a vicious lunge for her, but she was too quick for him. As he reached out to grab her, she stepped to one side and, neatly eluding his claw-like hands, placed the table between them. She caught up the telephone receiver. Gombet saw that Nancy Drew was not to be bluffed, and instantly a change came over him. The look of anger on his face changed to one of genuine fear. "Don't telephone!" he begged almost childishly. "I'll go." Nancy hesitated, undecided in her course. She had no wish to start a scandal in River Heights by calling the attention of the police to the threats the man had made, for she realized that the resulting publicity might not do her father any good. Yet she wondered if she could trust the man to keep his word. "All right then, go," she said curtly, without relinquishing her hold on the telephone. "I'll give you 20 seconds to get out of here. If I see you hanging around the house, I'll call the police." Hastily, Nathan Gombet picked up his hat and, with a last glance toward Carson Drew's desk, turned to leave. Nancy followed him from the study, watching him closely lest he try to work a trick upon her. In the doorway, the man paused and looked back. "I'll have my rights before I get through," he muttered. "Your father ain't seen the last of this, not by a jugful." Slamming the door behind him, he tramped across the porch and was gone. From the living room window, Nancy watched him until he disappeared around the corner. "I almost wish I'd called the police," she thought. The idea of saying the things he did about Dad. He thought he could scare me into giving him those papers. The encounter had disturbed her considerably, for she realized that in Nathan Gombet, her father could have a troublesome enemy. She was convinced that the man was without scruples. Unquestionably, his accusations were entirely false, but if he spread his story about River Heights, undiscerning persons might accept it as fact. As former district attorney at River Heights, a city in the Middle West, Carson Drew had built up an enviable reputation for himself, but the character of his work was such that he had made enemies as well as staunch friends. Those whom he had antagonized were ever on the lookout for an opportunity to undermine the reputation he had made for himself. So far, Carson Drew had more than held his own against unscrupulous persons, for he was known as a fighter. Nancy was Carson Drew's only child, but though she had been indulged, she had never been spoiled. She was an unusually pretty girl, fair of skin with friendly blue eyes and golden curly hair. Her friends declared that she was as clever as she was attractive. Since the death of her mother a number of years before, Nancy had found it necessary to be resourceful and efficient. Not only had she assumed the management of the Drew household, but she took a keen interest in her father's law cases, especially those which smacked of mystery. She had been present at a number of interviews with noted detectives, and her father declared she had a natural talent for digging into interesting cases. Only the summer before, she had taken it upon her own slender shoulders to solve a mystery which had baffled capable lawyers. When no one could locate Josiah Crowley's missing will, Nancy, in an effort to aid Abigail Rowan and Allie and Grace Horner, had taken over the task herself. Her thrilling adventures, which included an encounter with robbers, are told in that first volume of this series entitled The Secret of the Old Clock. Of late, Nancy Drew had longed for another exciting experience which would give her an opportunity to use her wits, little dreaming of what was in store for her. Yet, as she turned slowly away from the window after watching Nathan Gombet vanish down the street, she had a certain premonition of trouble ahead. If I hadn't threatened to call the police, that man would have injured me, she thought. I do wish Father were here. I want to tell him about Nathan Gombet and the threat he made. It wouldn't surprise me if he should try to make trouble. Nancy was indeed disturbed. Never for an instant did she credit any of the statements the man had made, but from his appearance and actions, she was inclined to believe that he would stoop to anything in order to gain his end. He has some dishonest scheme up his sleeve, she assured herself. Dad will explain everything when he comes home. Try as she would, she could not forget the unpleasant interview. Her afternoon was completely ruined. In vain she tried to read. After a time she busied herself with some sewing, but had to rip nearly everything out. It's no use, she sighed. I can't keep my mind on what I'm doing. I wish someone would come home. This house is getting on my nerves. Glancing at the clock, Nancy saw that it was only 4 o'clock. Hannah would not return for at least an hour, and she could not expect her father until late that evening. Folding up her sewing, she arose and crossed over to the desk. She regarded it speculatively. Gombet said it was a deed he wanted, she told herself. If it's actually here, I think I'd better find it and put it in the safe. She seated herself before the desk and, opening a drawer, began to go over the papers carefully. As she examined the first document she picked up, there came a sharp ring of the doorbell. So unexpected was the noise that Nancy started. What could it mean? Had Nathan Gombet returned to make more trouble? Quickly thrusting the papers back into the desk, she closed down the top and locked it. Then she made her way resolutely to the front door. End of Chapter 2.